Live from the Balls Visual Radio Studios, this is the Blades on Ball show. And now, here's your host, the voice of South African rugby himself, Hugh Bladen. Hugh, it's over to you.
Fantastic weekend of sport it was. The Proteas wiping out the Pakistanis, 3 wins for our Super Rugby sides against New Zealand sides. I haven't really got all the stats and the records and that sort of thing, although I am quite interested in stats. But I wonder when last we actually had 3 wins against New Zealand sides on one weekend. And particularly with 2 of them being away. The Bulls, a great win against the Blues, and then the Cheetahs. Amazing how this game turns around. And those guys, I don't do it, but the guys who play Super Brew, wow, I wonder how many guys got 100% on Super Brew this weekend, because John Kerwin, Sir John Kerwin, the coach of the Auckland Blues, Sir John Kerwin, I didn't realize he had been knighted. And I knew Henry had been knighted. We could have Sir Jake White, or Sir, who was the guy who coached our side that won the African Cup of Nations? Barker. Sir Clive Barker. Would be quite fun. Sir Gary Kirsten. Would be quite fun too. But yeah, what a weekend. I was down in Port Elizabeth, so we were traveling, quite a lot of the weekend. I mean, 4 hours in the air basically. And coming back at the crack of dawn on Sunday morning, so I didn't see the Bulls game. We were catching up with the Stormers Chiefs game. The Chiefs really coming back at the Stormers, but well done to the Stormers, holding on 36-34. Before that, I hadn't seen a lot of the Cheetahs games because of the travel. But the Cheetahs, everybody thought they'd get pounded. And really great to see them come through. And then the Sharks against the Kings. Well, I have to say, if the people in Port Elizabeth, the Southern Kings, what support. I mean, absolutely incredible. They said it was a sellout. I saw a few empty seats around the park. But I reckon there were 40,000 people there. And just an incredible vibe at the Nelson Mandela Bay Stadium. Nelson Mandela Bay Stadium, Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, NMMU. It's quite a mouthful. They are playing because they were on the plane with me yesterday morning, coming up to play against Pika. So it's sport, and more sport. I mean, Vodacom Cup, the Lions had a good win against the Leopards. They played that at Pirates, who are having their 125th anniversary, and I believe there are a couple of functions coming up at Pirates. I heard that Nick Mallett's going to be a guest speaker at one of their functions, and so it's all happening. A little bit worried about the Sharks, and last week I said I was going to talk about bias. And 1 or 2 things happened, and we didn't get round to it. And I spoke at a function at St. John's College on Friday night. Very nice. Great to see the St. John's College old boys getting back into the situation, getting back into the scene. These schools need the old boys to back them. I know, Paarl Boys High, I've got an incredibly strong old boys association. Paarl Gym. My old school, King Edwards, I know have a very, very strong old boys situation. And St. John's College, who been in a little bit of a dip in that area, not in a dip in education or anything like that. Their rugby has gone off a little bit after a couple of years ago. They had a very good season. In fact, I think they were almost unbeaten until they lost to Michael House in the last seconds of their final game. My facts may be right, but they're almost unbeaten. Unheard of for St. John's to be unbeaten. I'm not biased against St. John's because I had 3 uncles and 4 cousins there. So, again, we talk about bias, and I'm not biased against the Sharks, but the Sharks have now played 4 hours of Super Rugby and scored 2 tries. That worries me, and I'm sure you rugby connoisseurs who are Sharks fans have got to be a little bit worried about the fact 240 minutes of rugby, and they've scored 2 tries in the Super Rugby. The first 20 minutes of the game on Saturday night, I mean, they were all over the Southern Kings, like 83 to 90% of the possession in the first 20 minutes, and they couldn't score. Give the Southern Kings 110% for heart and for tackling, putting their bodies on the line. There's an old cliche, putting your body on the line. They really did. I take my hat off to, the likes of Strauss and their loose forwards were tremendous on defense. In fact, everybody was tremendous on defense. And the Sharks must be a little bit worried. We get 85% of the possession in the first 20 minutes. We don't score. I think, in my personal opinion, it comes from backing up. I don't think our players are backing up enough. Fly half, scrum half, inside centre, must be sprinting to get into position. It's an energy-sapping game, but you've got to be sprinting to get into position and running yourself into open spaces. Guys talk about running in triangular formations and things like that. I said, what a lot of hogwash. What you do is you run in support, you run into open spaces and run where the opposition aren't. And so my advice to John Plumtree would be to analyze. They've got analysts all over the place. Analyze where they're at and analyze their ability to run into open spaces and create more space. Because when you've got a side that are putting their bodies on the line and they're tackling like that, you are not going to run through them. You're not going to run over them or around them. One's got to have extra runners in the situation. I'm a bit of a follower of American Idols. I think, American Idols they're down to their last 10. I think the girls are absolutely incredible. Guys this year, okay. One or two of them are pretty good, but not collectively. The girls are absolutely incredible. And they have Nicki Minaj and Keith Urban and Mariah Carey. I thought we'd play some of their music. And so right now, Nicki Minaj. Like that, Nicki Minaj, Starships. Sometimes I sort of think, how are these judges qualified to give such crits on the singers? But Nicki Minaj, Starships, a great number. And we had the video of it going here. And do they get the video of it on the screen? Yes. Great. So what a video that is of Nicki Minaj. Really good. And Keith Urban. I know we're supposed to be talking more sport than music. I once talked music to Morph Mayberg. Morph Mayberg heard that I was quite keen on my music, and he started to talk to me about Morph Mayberg. Who was Morph Mayberg? He was one of South Africa's great front rankers. He was a huge man, great guy, and very intelligent. He was a policeman, great mate of Frick de Preers. And he heard that I was quite interested in music and started to talk to me about Brahms and Bach and Beethoven, and whether Placido Domingo was a better tenor than Carreras, or whether Pavarotti was the best of the three of them, those three tenors who were so great. And Morph, I don't know why I started talking to you about Morph. Oh, the music. He was so into music. And Keith Urban, I think he's such a cool dude, Keith Urban. Married to Nicole Kidman. Tattoos all over the place, but that doesn't matter. But he's a good guy. And Mariah Carey, who obviously is a diva in her own right. So yeah, American Idol is one of the things. Talking about bias, I once had a guy who accosted me in the street and said, "Hoekom is jy teen die leeu's? Why are you against the lions?" And I said to him, "Hold on, I actually started with the Lions many years ago as an under-20 player. I captained the Lions under-20 side. I then played for the Lions through a whole menagerie of sort of being involved. I was convener of the Lions selection committee. I ended up on their executive committee. And the guy has a temerity to say to me, "Hoe kom as jy teen die leeu's?" Now, what had happened was that the Sharks had played the Lions and had thumped them by about 30 points. And obviously, when a side wins by 30 points, one side is going to be attacking, the other side is going to be defending. And so you tend to call the one side. Okay, so in this case, the Sharks. So you're calling the Sharks players' names far more than you're calling the Lions players. And you've been complimentary to the Sharks because they're attacking and scoring tries. And so it does sound sometimes like you're biased against the Lions. Sometimes, people will say you're biased against the Sharks or whoever it is, whoever you support, and you don't say nice things about them all the time. You think you're biased against them. I didn't see an awful lot of the Stormers games. I thought the Stormers, the Chiefs have had an incredible run. They are the reigning champions, and the Chiefs were trailing the Stormers by a whole host of points and then started running at the Stormers and getting it back to 36-34, and the Stormers doing very well to hold on. I mean, that's a great win. The Chiefs are the champions. They've had some really good wins this season. They run the ball at you, and they, if you want to watch attractive football right now, I would say the Chiefs are the guys. I wonder how much flack John Kerwin's going to get for making 6 changes to the Auckland Blues side that had done so well against the Crusaders, and the Auckland Blues losing to the Bulls in Auckland. I'm not sure that the Bulls have ever beaten the Blues at Eden Park. So a great win there, and then of course the Cheetahs with that total turnaround. They got thumped the week before, and then that total turnaround. Just on to cricket. I mean, it's so great to see a guy like Ingram making 100. De Villiers, GAB's a great player. One shot off the back foot, a back foot lofted cover drive, was absolutely fantastic. And then you see, Vernon Philander comes onto the test scene and is absolutely phenomenal in terms of the wickets he's taken at test level. And then you see Rory Kleinfeldt, who comes into the scene and takes 4 for 22. Absolutely brilliant. You may be hearing a dial tone. Now that dial tone, not dial tone.
Hello, Dan Retief.
Ringing tone, because it's Dan Retief.
Hello.
Dan.
Yes, hi, Dan.
Blades, how are you?
I'm good, and you?
Yeah, wonderful. We have Dan Retief live on Balls Radio. Dan Retief, award-winning journalist, and probably the most accomplished analytical mind in South African rugby in terms of journalism and the way things should be written and that sort of thing. Great to talk to you, Dan. How are things?
Yeah, no, Blades, and thanks for that announcement. The check's in the post.
Dan, just to pick up on your last 2 articles in the Sunday Times, one a letter to Heineke Meyer, and I have to tell you that Heineke Meyer, just by way of background, if you haven't heard it, Heineke Meyer, and you didn't read Dan's write-up or Dan's article in the Sunday Times last week, what happened was Heineke Meyer wrote to the media saying, "Dear media," and then saying, it's going to be a tough season, this is what I want to do, blah, 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 blah. Signed Heineke Meyer, looking forward to your support and that sort of thing, because coaches, believe me, need support of the media. If the media turn against a coach, he's in real trouble. And so last Sunday, Dan wrote a letter, and I hope many of you read that, which was Dear Heineke, and he gave a lot of his points. And then this last Sunday, Dan wrote an article. Now, Dan, I sort of was saying a little earlier that the Sharks have played 4 hours of rugby. 260 minutes.
Yeah.
No, sorry, 204 sixes are 24. 240 minutes of rugby, and they've scored 2 tries. Now, this rather epitomizes what you said in your articles.
Yes, and I must say I was so disappointed watching the Sharks this weekend, and as you well point out, Blades, is that I reacted to Heineke's letter. I appreciated the fact that he'd reached out to us, and I think coaches need to do that, because if you look back on the history, so many of the coaches, their sort of tenure went wrong when they started to come across badly in the media. You know, it is a constituency they have to have a look at.
Yeah.
And I disagreed with him that our rugby was exciting and intense, as he was putting across, because I thought our rugby, especially on the tour last year, was exceptionally boring. You know, and that we didn't try to play. I then felt that I hadn't said it all, so I thought, well, let me write a column about this constant debate we have about the level of our play and what we're trying to achieve. And I think another part of the background is that the IRB are determined to make rugby a more spectacular game. And the reason they have to do that is because they compete for audience, and they're competing with football and athletics and the Olympics and enormously big events all over the world. And there is a view that rugby doesn't look good on television. Now, unfortunately, television is the thing that drives the finances, so it's important that the game must be a spectacle, you know. And from that perspective, I thought, and I felt very strongly that we just don't have the right attitude, that our teams tend not to want to play running rugby or tend not to want to use the ball. If you listen to New Zealand coaches talk, and you look at the sort of goals that the New Zealand teams and the All Blacks set themselves, the Wallabies, another team, for instance, they were very big on that, is that we play with the ball. And I just felt that over the last couple of years we've gone consistently into our shells, that our rugby is caught in a straitjacket, and that we just don't run the ball enough. And I'm feeling that the problem is the attitude. It's the safety first attitude. Take no chances, make no mistakes, and win the game any old way you can. And I believe we need to move on. And then as this latest game and the Sharks, and I was very disappointed. I thought Patrick Lambie, he's been called a running fly half. There's been a lot of support for Patrick Lambie because in the Springboks he's meant to kick the ball a lot. And yet in the game against the Force, where he was playing in a team that was riddled with international players, that had 85% of the ball, 85% of the field position, the Sharks just could not score a try. And to me that was because the whole structure is wrong. The structure was not based on trying to use the ball to score tries, and the reason for that would probably be alignment, too scared to create the depth, and then a complete lack of variation in the moves. You know, so obviously the first fault was that they didn't do the build up, because in a game like that where you expected to win well and really set the tone, so many teams make the mistake of not first setting the foundation. You know, for instance, the Sharks never drove off the back of the scrum to haul in some of the loose forward tacklers, to try to pull in the inside backs and maybe create a bit of space. All they did was shuffle the ball out to the wings, and that is, to me, is a team that is not attempting to play running rugby. That even though they claim they do, you know, that in their makeup there isn't an attitude that says we've got to get out there and we've got to score tries, because that is the aim of the game. Sorry, Blades, I'm going on a bit.
No.
Because
carry on. I just want to interject. I just want to interject for a moment. And you know, a lot of people will say, "Oh, you know, play running rugby, but defensive situations don't allow that," and that sort of thing. I just want to side with you and say, guys, you know, we are not, and I'm not an advocate of getting on the park and just chucking the ball around willy-nilly, and I know Dan isn't. So that's not where Dan's coming from. What he's saying is move the ball into space. I think that's what we're looking for. Yeah.
And I'm right with you. I mean, between the two of us, we've watched so much rugby, and I'd say making a quick pass and throwing a 50-50 ball, That's not running rugby. Doing a quick tap, that's not running rugby. Running rugby has to be in your attitude. It has to be in the way you approach the game. And then you have to have those enormous amount of variations, and I think, I must say, I get sick to death of people telling me how well the Kiwi sides play. And that was so nice that we in fact had 3 wins over Kiwi sides this weekend. And I would like to talk about this weekend because I thought there was a distinct change. But you need to then add all that ammunition, how do you manipulate the space? How do you get a player into space? And in one of the conversations I recently had, I asked some people who were talking to me, can you recall Brian Abana, who is arguably the best left wing in the world? Can you recall Brian Abana, since playing for the Stormers, being put away in the open? Can you recall any one incident where the world's best wing has been given space on the outside? Now, that is rugby 101, is to create a situation where your really pacey player is given a chance to beat his man on the outside. And it's there's a very simple move, a double skip, and especially the double skip to the fullback coming up, because you can't really mark the fullback. So there are a lot of things you can do.
Yeah.
But just to return to this weekend, I was so heartened to see the Stormers start to play some rugby, and they got a win over the Chiefs, and it got a bit tense, and their defence that they're known for fell away a bit, because I thought the Chiefs got their tries too easily. But it was good to see, let's, for want of a better word, Western Province, who've always attempted to play running rugby. That's what their reputation has been built on. For the Stormers to start using the ball, to see a young guy like Elton Yankees, who's got a real attacking instinct, allowed to do a couple of things with the ball to try and put people into better positions. And guess what? They're the Stormers. They scored a good win. I think it was very satisfying for the crowd. And then the other team, of course, is the Free State. We've always known that they've run. Yeah, and I've read 1 or 2 articles that the luck ran with them, that the one try I thought might have been a knock-on, because I thought the ball was slapped down. It wasn't charged down. But there was a team trying to run the ball, trying to move the ball right from the word go. And then again, Blades, the Bulls, on Sunday morning, I had to watch it on PVR. I wasn't up to that early start. But
yeah.
I was so impressed by the Bulls because they started doing something different. The very first ball they got was in that driving situation that they loved so well, and they ran it. And I loved the statement they made. And then I saw a subtle change in the way they were driving, is they tried to stay on their feet. So they were really explosive on the drive. They put players into the forward area, and they had a lot of energy, and they were moving forward on the feet. And what I liked about that is that meant that certain of the forwards and the inside backs started being drawn to where the ball was because they needed to defend. Whereas we've tended to go, make contact, fall on the ground, and the defenders just lean on the maul, and you commit one man. And what the Bulls were doing was driving through the middle, and I've been wanting to see that. Hold the ball close, stay on your feet. And when they drive, when those people get drawn in, the swarm of bees get drawn in, the space then gets created all over the field because then less players standing waiting to tackle. And guess what? The Bulls scored some outstanding tries on the outside. So especially their first try, hard driving up the middle, Pierce staying on his feet, committing people to the tackle, the next guy committing people to the tackle. Those people are now drawn in, and the Bulls just went pass, and the man on the outside was left free. And it's so simple when it's done that way, and it's just, I've been very frustrated watching our rugby, and that it doesn't happen often enough.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing, just tell me, because I apart from, so I was telling people that I was in the air for almost 4 hours and then didn't get to see the Bulls because I came back and then had a family lunch yesterday. And I saw glimpses of the Stormers game and just glimpses. How was Johan Goosen?
Yeah, he's definitely improved. I think he's starting to find his range. I worry about him because he's a great talent, but he's had, for a young player, 20-year-old, he's already had 2 major major injuries, both of which required surgery, and I think he's a talent that one has to preserve. He's definitely finding his range, and Free State could, in fact, I think if they had to have a rugby sprint competition between all the backlines, in fact, there's something for a promoter.
Wouldn't it
let's
be
have
wonderful?
A rugby sprint. Yeah, I mean, fantastic to see it, wouldn't it? Who has the overall fastest backline in Super Rugby? But Free State might well win that race because they got some fantastic pace in their backline. I thought Saro Pretorius, obviously he did score some tries, but he was outstanding, And I know he's been taken on a Springbok tour. He's been noticed. Then he went off to the Waratahs, and he seems to be really enjoy being back with Free State Cheetahs. And one of the reasons they played so outstanding is that they were letting the ball go, obviously up against the side in the Highlanders, who also like to give the ball some air. So the game was quite spectacular. And they did have some luck. Balls being charged down that fell right in the way of somebody going forward. But Gary Player's old saying, you make your luck. It's the way you try to play. So I was really so chuffed for the Cheetahs, because they had to go a long way, to Invercargill, the world's southernmost city, where they've won once before. But they won impressively. They won like the Bulls did. They got on top and they stayed on top, and they showed that those elements of South African rugby, which is our physicality and our aggressive tackling and the fact that we put our bodies on the line, those things are all good, and nobody ever says take that out of the game. Those things matter, and we're probably the best in the world at that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But we've got to add other things to that sort of bedrock of our rugby, because and the one thing, and I know we've often sat and talked about this. I mean, South Africa, we play rugby damn well, Blades. We're good at this game. We won the World Cup twice.
Sure.
But I would like, and the perspective that I come from is that I would like the Springboks and our Super Rugby teams to be playing the best rugby in the world, and to be playing to that talent that we have. I mean, we see our youngsters who've just last year won their version of the Rugby World Cup. We've got such talent, such pace, but we've got to be playing a structure of a game that is intended to exploit that pace, to exploit that talent, and put people into positions
We've got to use the talent.
You've got to use the talent, and sadly, I mean, I've been a little bit harsh on Pat Lambie, and what happened to him against the Force, and all credit to the Kings, all credit to the Kings. They played with great determination to just tackle, and stand their ground. But the Sharks had so much ball, and it might well be that it's been such a long time since Patrick Lambie's had to play a really attacking game that's what's happened. They've gone into their shells, and they've sort of lost the habit of attack, and we need to regain that. But as I said, there were some really heartening signs from the other teams, who sort of rediscovered their sense of attack and sense of alignment and space. For instance, one of the things the New Zealand teams do quite well, and which they create tries, but our team, you don't see our teams, they often line up quite deep. Now, I know our coaches are terrified of a deep-lying backline, but to me, that is a tactic. You can use it occasionally, line up quite deep, you pull the defense up to you, they've got to travel further to get to you, which means their alignment's not good, and you could often create a situation where you're facing one guy out of the line, and now your sharp jinking center can beat him on either side, and then suddenly it's on. We could spend the entire morning talking about backline ploys, and backline tactics. None of which are brand new. They've been around forever. The scissors, for instance, you don't see a good scissors movement anymore.
Sure.
And a scissors is a really a key component for somebody trying to break through a very shallow-lying defensive line. And then, nobody's saying take the kick out of the game either. We saw the Chiefs use the grubber with absolute stunning effect, and I know that if the grubber has performed well against a very flat-lying defensive line, you almost can't defend it, because especially if you do it sort of 20 yards out, once the ball's through the defensive line and it sits up on the other side, who's going to stop you? And that's what the Chiefs were doing. But then you've got to practice the grubber
Sure.
Ad infinitum.
And you know, you've got to read the grubber as well, your outside players. You know, every kick, no kick is good unless there are chasers. And that's
Absolutely.
what worries me, Dan, is that when you remember when we went down to Kimberley to watch, to interview the Griquas guys, and we were at the Griquas practice, and I pointed out that the fly half and the inside centres were not backing up. And that's what worries me, is we're not getting enough players, you know, the likes of Patrick Lambie. I know we're having a bit of a go at poor old Patrick Lambie. He's such a delightful boy. I actually saw him on Saturday night and had a nice chat to him, because I'd never really met him in person before. And he's such a charming young man. But, you know, I think the other fly halves in South African rugby might take a sort of... We need to have those guys chasing after the ball.
Yes,
so there is a
because
continuity of runners. You know, you have your fly half, your inside centre, your outside. Once they've passed, they now. And sorry, I'm just digressing for a moment. It has become so apparent in Dan Carter's play. Dan Carter is passing the ball and then meandering around, waiting for the next second phase ball. He's not running into an open space as a backup player. And I think it's really affecting the Crusaders' attack, because that's where they were really brilliant.
Yeah, and in fact, watching Dan Carter is a good one to bring up, because he looks to me as definitely not the player that we know. And I wonder if he's still having problems. You know, he's had a groin and an Achilles, and he just doesn't run to those positions that he used to be able to, and sort of turn up where you least expect him to be.
And then that explosive pace, once he had backed up, that explosion into the gap.
Yeah, and I remember that day at Kimberley, you know, where you just shook your head, because you actually called me over and said, "I've got to say this to you. Have a look at these moves they're practicing. The fly-off takes the ball, makes the pass, and then stands and watches the move." And I think your point was, you know, you tend to play as you practice.
Yeah.
And the other one that I wish I could have spent a bit more time on in my column was Sonny Bill Williams, who came into the game, did some unusual things, and then everybody started talking about offloading, you know.
Yeah.
And offloading is basically making a quick pass.
It's a pass.
Pass.
Yeah. I actually hate the term offload.
You know? But anyway, he gave us offload. But
yeah.
The reason Sonny Bill Williams became so prominent and such a dangerous player is because of the players around him, who were consistently there on either side of him or behind him, just expecting, in case he passed the ball.
Yes, expecting the ball.
There was somebody there running for that ball. And you know, somebody like Liam Messam, for instance, would run there for the whole game.
Yes.
And maybe not get it.
Yeah.
Maybe not get it.
Yeah.
But when Sonny Bill Williams needed to get rid of the ball, there was somebody waiting just in case.
Yeah.
And you know, I think John Mitchell, when he was in charge of the Lions, and the Lions won the Currie Cup, you know, John, one of his favourite phrases was, you know, you've got to trust the man on your shoulder.
Yes.
And by that he meant, you know, in every situation, know that he'll make his tackle, but also in your attacking situation, trust that that man is there. And one of the sides to me always that brought it in, and then it went from the Brumbies under Rod McQueen with George Gregan, is that they played basically Isaacs van Heerden's triangle or diamond of support. And there was always somebody hovering on the left, hovering on the right, and they even put Owen Finnegan right behind George Gregan all the time. And if Gregan got into trouble, he'd pop it back to Finnegan, who would set up the ruck again, try and clean, try and commit people, and the whole team was attuned to make yourself available for that pass.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that the ball carrier could say, look, if I'm in trouble, I can pass because somebody's there, you know. And I think we've let that go out of our rugby to a certain extent. But I've got to emphasise, you know, when people tell me how much better New Zealand rugby is, I absolutely don't agree. I think it's just a question of approach and a question of attitude, and we can bring it right back into our game. And I think the other thing that troubles me too is players who call for a ball or take a ball to a position where they expose it to be turned over. You know,
yeah.
I sometimes wonder, don't they scan? You know, you would recall the name Vic Kavanagh, who's the great Otago coach who brought rucking into the game when Otago were the greatest rucking side, and then that went to the All Blacks. And he had a simple thing in his coaching philosophy, and that was to count the numbers. So, and invariably it comes off your fly-off, who plays with his head up. And if you look up and you're meant to have 5 players on your open side and 7 players facing you, and you look up and there's a player missing.
Yeah.
There's only 4, or there's only 3. Well, there's space, and then you attack that hard. And for instance, a quick ball from the ruck. Remember the old rule: a quick ball has to be run.
Well, I mean, I hate being a Wenwy, but we had a simple rule: scrum ball, you did your moves around the scrum; line-out balls, you did your set-piece moves, and loose ball went to the wing. And I don't think that's changed an awful lot. If you're getting the ball on the front foot, that's why I go mad when they run forward. Let's say the forwards are running forward, and they get a quick ball, and another forward picks it up and tries to make another 3 or 4 meters, and nullifies the whole fact that the opposition are scrambling to get back on side and back into defensive lines. And
and are completely disorganized.
Yeah, and some guy will pick it up and try and make those other 4 or 5 meters.
Yeah, and then the modern thing is then to make contact, find somebody to run into, and take the ball to ground. Now, I think with the way the law's been tweaked, you definitely have to really work very hard in getting back on your feet and staying on your feet, because you don't want to be playing on the ground, because that slows the ball down. It means the defenders don't have to worry about you. You're on the ground. And they just stand off and start fanning out. But if you're driving over that ball, in other words, rucking, and you're quite dynamic in that situation, it means somebody else gets drawn in, because that should be the whole idea: is to draw as many players to the ball as quickly as possible, as dynamically as possible, so that theoretically the spaces appear elsewhere. But we've sort of fallen into a habit of you run at one player who stops you. And make sure you come to ground, and we don't run from a deep enough position so that there's no momentum. I just think that there seems to be an indication this weekend that everybody is latched on to saying, look, you can win finals by defending, and Jack White always said you win Rugby World Cups by defending. But there comes a time that you've got to score 7 points instead of 3 points.
Yes.
And how do you score those 7 points? And I think the Sharks game against the Kings was a classic case of that. The Sharks had enough ball. It was a game they probably targeted for 4 tries, and they just could not score that try. And then instead of trying different things, doing different things, they just kept moving the ball side to side. There was no angle running, no changing of somebody coming off the wing. The fullback didn't come up into the line to try to make that extra man, and eventually they just got it wrong. And whenever one says that, of course, that's not a criticism of the Kings. I thought the Kings did what they could do, and
I thought they did brilliantly on the day. In terms of tackling and the support. Yeah. I mean, they were really brave. Ronnie Cook and Andre Strauss, and the likes of Wimpy van der Walt, they tackled it. When Louis Ludwig's try was disallowed for a forward pass, and quite rightly so, I thought this is a 50 points against the Kings.
Yeah.
And
I thought, the floodgates are going to open.
Absolutely.
And I even thought to myself how unfair that would be. That if the Kings shipped a big one, having played so well, and it just shows you can play with sheer guts. You can, of course you can.
Yeah.
What worries me for the Kings is in their road ahead. I mean, if they're going to get pounded in the scrums as they were, and their lineout's not that secure, and they're making 100+ tackles, that can't last. It might even be this weekend when they play the Chiefs.
Yeah.
The Chiefs who are switching direction, doing grubbers. Constantly mixing up the options. They could ship one there because you can't just play on tackling everything that moves. And I saw the injuries starting to appear, in their sort of very thinned out ranks.
Yeah.
But the other thing, Blades, wasn't it nice to see that crowd in Port Elizabeth?
Absolute bedlam. It was fantastic. You know, we have earphones on, as you well know, Dan, and having done this job before in terms of commentating. And I mean, I couldn't hear our director. And I couldn't.
Brilliant.
Robbie Kempson was my co-commentator. I had him turned right up. Could hardly hear him. It was absolute bedlam throughout the game. Really fantastic. Dan, thanks for joining us. Guys and girls at home, that's one of the great analytical brains of South African rugby. So much to think about. What do you think? What do you think about the Stormers, your team, the Cheetahs, the Sharks, even the Southern Kings? Tweet us on Balls Radio and give us your opinion, because Dan Retief has given us his expert opinion. Dan, lovely talking to you. We will do so again if we may.
Yes, Blades, and I really look forward to that. And good luck with your show. You know, I think you ideally cut out for it, and I can see that Monday mornings is gonna be, people are going to be slipping away for a coffee, just to get your opinion.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks so much for joining us. In a moment, we're going to have me great mate, the one and only Sydney Harold Nomus, and right now Simon is going to play us some music.
That was the Blades on Ball show. Join the voice of South African rugby on your wireless next Monday for more unbelievable memories and banter. Until then, stay classy, like 20-year-old Glenn Morangi classy.